From its very beginning, Christianity was considered an underground cult until the fall of the Roman Empire. The period between the 4th and 6th century AD is considered the time when the earliest Christian artwork evolved, due largely to the official recognition of Christianity. And with this recognition came a greater interest in illustrating events of the Bible, which not only decorated the church, but served as teaching aids. This was the period of the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire, which moved the capital from Rome to Ravenna. During this period, a Mediterranean style evolved due to the cultural influences of Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, Turkey. Although these works have a Middle Eastern appearance, they are clearly Christian in purpose. But as they gained acceptance, they were banned for 100 years due to the original commandment prohibiting graven images. When the ban was lifted in 1843 AD, a blend of Greek Hellenic and Byzantine styles came forth. Most of the works of the Italio-Byzantine period had been mosaics. But by the Middle Ages, painting was to make its greatest advances. The St. Francis altar works by Bonaventura Berlinghieri represent the Lucca school and reflect the Proto-Renaissance period. And cities such as Tuscany, Lucca, Pisa, Siena, and Florence became the major centers for the artistic movement that we know as the Italian Renaissance. This was also the result of the new political structure based on Italian commerce. One of the first major artists from this period was Duccio di Buoninsegna. Duccio was the founder of the Siena school and combined the Byzantine style with a fine sense of drama. Among Duccio's work is the impressive Maestra. This massive altarpiece stands 7 feet high and features the Madonna enthroned in majesty as the Queen of Heaven. Duccio's Maestra was originally painted on both sides, with the back illustrating the life of Christ. While conceived as a two-sided piece, it was cut apart in the 16th century, and its parts are now housed in the various museums around the world. Just as Duccio earned his place in Siena, another important figure was emerging in Florence. Giotto di Bondone was influenced by the Roman school of painting, and his works broke from the Byzantine tradition. But much of his early inspiration seems to come from his teacher, Giancanni Cimabue. Cimabue was interested in extending beyond the Italo-Byzantine style with a more naturalistic approach. While Giotto painted on wood, he also mastered the ancient Roman fresco technique of painting into wet plaster. And in 1305, Giotto applied this to his greatest achievement, the Arena Chapel in Padua. 40 frescoes were painted depicting the lives of Mary and Jesus. The narrative is divided into 3 horizontal sections. The top row illustrates the story of Mary. The middle row illustrates the life of Jesus. And the third row depicts the Passion of Jesus from betrayal to Pentecost. The entire presentation concludes with the huge fresco of the Last Judgment. Truly, Giotto's Arena Chapel works are an impressive achievement of the 14th century Florentine school, which set the standards for all others to follow. Back in Siena, 3 of Duccio's students introduced a greater sense of pictorial realism. One of them was Simone Martini, who combined the Gothic style with elegant color and costuming. Martini's work reflected the tastes of European aristocrats and set the tone for the international style that remained throughout the 15th century. At the same time, the Lorenzetti brothers studied under Duccio, and their contributions to pictorial realism carried them beyond the achievements of their teacher. Where Martini's work reflected the affluence of the aristocracy, the Lorenzettis embraced Siena's middle class while retaining Martini's use of brilliant color. But the youngest of these innovators was the Florentine artist Masaccio, who was regarded as the first great Italian painter. He used a geometrical approach to composition while continuing in the Martini style. In just 6 years, Masaccio's approach to composition brought great change, and while he was making great strides, a promising career was cut short with his death at age 27. But his discoveries paved the way for his successors to expand the pictorial science he founded. One of those successors was Piero della Francesca, whose work displayed the same sense of geometry with a sophisticated use of light and color. In the Resurrection, Piero introduced a triangular composition that would be employed by the Renaissance artists that followed. He was bound by tradition and directed artists back to the simple, less ordained statements found in the works of Giotto. Fra Filippo Lippi was another monk with a similar connection to the church, but was completely opposite in personality and artistic taste. And through the influence of the de' Medici family, Fra Filippo was spared the punishment and expulsion for his unconventional ways. As a result, the works promoted by Fra Filippo brought a greater feeling for the human figure, which was carried further by Sandro Botticelli. Botticelli refined the techniques of solid drawing and established the sensitive and exotic style that typified the early Florentine Renaissance. His beautiful visions led to several commissions from the de' Medici family. In 1475, he painted a contemporary version of the Adoration of the Magi that catered to his sponsors. A close look at the wise men reveals the images of the grandfather, father, and uncle of Lorenzo de' Medici. Although the theme was religious in nature, works of this type were criticized as sacrilegious at the time when the Protestant Reformation was sweeping Europe. As a result, the noble families were driven from Florence and the artists lost their patrons, which brought the end to the Florentine culture. The politics and fortunes of Florence changed. Botticelli adapted and joined several of his contemporaries in Rome who were engaged to decorate the Sistine Chapel. Under the guidance of Pope Sixtus IV, the Sistine Chapel was erected in 1477 as a reception area for the larger papal chapel. While a church, it resembled a fortress, and the exterior was extended to protect the church. The interior braced the principles of the faith, much like the Arena Chapel of Padua. But most of all, the Sistine Chapel serves as one of the most spectacular examples of architecture and decoration of the Italian Renaissance. From the beginning, the chapel was divided into 3 levels, including wall hangings on the first, murals on the second, and portraits of the popes next to the windows on top. The murals were contracted to 5 master painters: Cosimo Rosselli, Sandro Botticelli, Domenico Ghirlandaio, Pietro Perugino, and Luca Signorelli. The right wall illustrates the life of Christ. The left wall depicts the story of Moses. The decorative murals were completed in 1482 after a year of labor. In the original unveiling, the ceiling consisted of a field of stars. 27 years later, it was changed under Pope Julius II. The renowned Michelangelo Buonarroti was engaged in a sculpture commission for the tomb of the Pope when he was reassigned to the Sistine Chapel. Because painting was outside of his profession, Michelangelo protested. But his tempera painting of the Donna Madonna indicated ability in the eyes of the Pope. So in 1508, the 33-year-old sculptor struggled for the next 4 years, lying on his back, painting into wet plaster. While the original plan called for only 12 figures, by its finish in 1512, the project had grown to over 300 images covering 5,800 square feet. But Michelangelo's work was not complete. By 1534, a pessimistic spirit had taken over the Italian Renaissance. Perugino's mural of the Assumption of the Virgin that graced the wall over the altar had to be replaced with a stronger image. At first, the Resurrection was planned, but the dark days of the 1530s spawned a more dramatic image, Christ the Judge. This new theme fired the imagination of Michelangelo with its gigantic images of justice and punishment. The Last Judgment was just as demanding as the chapel ceiling and took 6 years to complete. And on the eve of All Saints' Day 1541, the enormous 44 by 48 foot fresco was unveiled. Clearly, the Last Judgment serves not only as an expression of the Christian faith, but is a testimony to all of the artists who came before and set the standards for what we can now call one of the most important masterpieces of all time.